Hello and welcome to DDG.
Declan Dad Gaming!
I'm your dad.
I am your Declan.
And today we're here to review the Asus Cerberus GTX 1050 Ti OC 4GB. My god, I'm glad I finally got that. I picked this up brand new last October for $289. We have seen it second hand on the market for about $175. Not as cheap as I was expecting when I was having a look, but that's what it is. Anything you'd like to share? Would you like to have some input or what?
Oh yeah! Here come the benchmarks!
Straight into the benchmarks. Okay, so moving through the benchmarks, we can see that there's pretty acceptable performance in Far Cry 5. Again, it's a fairly well optimized game. A couple of tweaks to the 1080p settings and you'll have yourself a fairly smooth experience. On Deus Ex Mankind Divided, we actually skipped the MSAA ×8 for this one. It didn't handle it, to put it bluntly, so we moved straight through to the no MSAA. I suspect you'd be able to tweak the settings in 1080p and still get a smooth experience. At least you'd hope so, because it'd be pretty disappointing to play it at 720p, although it does actually look not too bad in the ultra settings in 720p. 1440p is clearly a no-go. On to The Witcher 3. As you can see here, a couple of tweaks also in 1080p will probably do the job. You could play in 720p. Again, it's a title that actually doesn't look too bad in 720p with the ultra settings on. 1440p, surprisingly not as bad as I thought. Maybe a couple of tweaks there and you'd have sort of an acceptable performance, but your golden zone's probably 1080p. Final Fantasy 15 is much the same as The Witcher as we've seen with previous graphics cards. Performs almost identically. Again, a couple of setting tweaks to 1080p and you should be sweet. In Doom, you can pretty much have yourself a great experience in 1080p, pushing 75.9 frames on average. In fact, a couple of tweaks to 1440p and you probably have yourself a very smooth experience. 48.5 frames per second average is... it doesn't seem too bad, but when you're playing Doom, you definitely want more. That's not quite smooth enough for how fast-paced the game is. Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, as you can see here, very much the same. Get quite a few frames at 720p, but at the same time you get a very smooth experience in 1080p, so there shouldn't be any real need to drop down that far in the resolution. Again, a couple of tweaks to the settings at 1440p and you'd probably be alright. Divinity Original Sin 2. While 1080p delivers an extremely smooth experience with good settings, surprisingly you could probably play this on 1440p with the ultra settings and not be too upset. It's not a game that you really need a whole bunch of frames for and plays pretty smoothly at that 38.2 that I experienced anyway. On to GTA 5, some pretty surprising results here. At 1440p I had a magnificently smooth experience and didn't need to tweak any settings or anything to get it delivering smooth frames per second. 1080p certainly get a very smooth experience, but at the same time I would probably run it at 1440p. Fallout 76, a little bit disappointed with this. At 1080p you'd probably have to tweak a few settings to get a nice smooth experience. 47.6 frames per second when I was playing it just didn't seem enough. Not to line up shots properly and all that kind of thing. So you'd probably want to tweak a couple of settings here just to get yourself a smooth experience. Again, it wasn't actually too bad in 720p. It was certainly very smooth, but a little bit blurry, but probably not too bad. On to Battletech. This is another title a little bit like Divinity Original Sin 2, in which you could probably go without the frames. At 1440p it looks nice, and 31 frames per second is not too bad. It was good.
Conclusion time. The GTX 1050 Ti is overall a good card from what we can see, but if you have just a little bit of extra cash to chuck in there, then it might be worth your time to get the GTX 1060 instead, because, well, we were sort of expecting a little bit more out of it, though we did pick it up for how much?
So it was $289 brand new. We have seen it on the market for $175 as we showed before. If you're considering buying it brand new, I would seriously consider looking at second-hand GTX 1066 gigs because they offer much more performance, and you should be able to pick it up for a bit cheaper than what you can get brand new for a GTX 1050 Ti. One benefit though, it runs purely off the PCIe lane, doesn't require any extra power, so there's that. But other than that, yeah, just sort of a pretty middle to low range card that will get you over the line. Declan's quite upset about that, as you can see. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and we shall see you next time.
More videos to come!